This is Remo Daily, your daily dose of inspiration.
Tatiana, I'm going to put you on the spot because I'm going to start with something that John just put in the chat and that really confused me. John is a master of quotes and always enriches this conversation by sharing quotes that are fitting to the topic. And he shared a quote that says, "Sometimes exhaustion is not a result of too much time spent on something, but of knowing that in its place, no time is spent on something else." Do you understand that quote? And if so, what do you think when you read it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it talks about the duality of exhaustion. So there is this conscious level that we acknowledge, which is I am tired, right? But then below it, which it's even structured in this quote, the two halves of how it's structured. The second half is it is speaking to a subtext that would suggest regret, that would suggest a life that is not lived to its full capacity because we are spending our time in a way that doesn't align with what we wish we were doing. But we are very much caught in this hamster wheel. And I think in many ways, it is a quote that kind of has a negative connotation in a sense. But I think if you look at the optimism and the opportunity, which is what I try to do in my piece, it suggests that we have an opportunity to change wherever we are at any time, to make a different decision, to live a life that's more aligned, more restful, more intentional, and more energizing.
You called your piece that thousands of people reacted to, read, and that you published The Great Exhaustion. And we'll share the link in the chat here to your Medium page so that everybody can read it. Why did you create that headline? How did you come up with it?
Twofold, I would say. I mean, having a background as a journalist, there's a term in the world of journalism where we call it burying the lead. Whereas you'll see a headline and, the headline might be, wow, there's a lot of wildfires in Canada, right? But burying the lead is, this is global warming, right? This is a result of climate change, right? And so I felt like calling the phenomenon that we are seeing in the markets, the Great Resignation, is bearing the lead. That is the Great Exhaustion. That is, people were actually leaving because they are tired, because they are fed up. And I think as someone who had been a people manager for many years, I had never seen so many employees so exhausted. I had never seen so many colleagues going on leave. I had never seen so many disability requests and so much illness and so much stress. It was exponential during the pandemic. And I think that one of the silver linings of the pandemic is people realized I have a choice. I can choose to leave. I can choose to go somewhere else. I can choose to perhaps make less money, but have more flexibility and autonomy and freedom in my life. It was something that I had already realized to a large extent in my life, because remote work is not new to me and is not a result of the pandemic. I've been doing it for years and years and years. But I think it got to a much deeper level after I got sick. And I think that I started seeing people who I thought would never leave the 9-to-5 suddenly realize they have a choice. There's a new wave happening now that I'll probably write about, which is the great layoffs. And so all the last holdouts that were like, I'm not gonna leave, are sometimes being pushed out of the nest to find out what's next. And I say that with compassion as someone who has been laid off in my career. And every time it ever happened to me, it wound up being great. In the moment, it doesn't feel great. But I had no idea when I was writing that I was putting a name on something people felt, but it definitely struck a chord.
And you just talked about your career. I mean, when people look at your LinkedIn, like I did, it's almost like you have lived several lives. Like the things that you have achieved, the arc in the few decades that you have been here is just remarkable. It goes from a touring musician to a music journalist for a decade, a hacker, a writer. We just heard about that. A C-level executive who's worked at some of the biggest brand out there in tech and entertainment. I rattled some of them off in the beginning, the Twitters, the Tumblrs, the Nielsen's. A veteran of IPOs, you've been through that, and acquisitions. So you've also seen that part of the game, which I think is
Less fun.
yeah, less fun than most people think.
Yeah. More stress, more long.
And then you went through this whole transformation of the sickness. We will talk about that in a second. Before you did all of that, you worked at Disneyland as a tour guide. That's the first thing on your LinkedIn. And it made me smile that you put that in there. What did you take away from that job at Disneyland that you still think about today?
Two things. One, to this day, I do not point with one finger. I point with two fingers or an open hand. And it's funny, I do it without thinking. I posted a reel on Instagram this week and I went like this and I was like, oh man, I'm doing the Disney.
What?
Yeah. And
please help me. What does that mean?
When you point, you don't tell the guest like go over here. You go over here or go over here. It's just like it's like a less aggressive because
it's a more gentle way.
But if you're doing it like this, it seems more open to the guest, right? I generally don't wear more than one ring per hand. I don't know if this is still part of Disneyland park rules, but when I was a tour guide, you were not allowed to wear more than one ring per hand. When I went back recently, I was talking some plaids because I was a plaid. I was like people that wear the little plaid vests and whatnot. They were like, oh, we can have tattoos now and we could have, red nail polish. I was like, wow, because I thought me now could not work there anymore. But
oh my God.
The other thing I would say is, and this I've taken into my career is as someone who has been a CMO and who has been a brand executive, and I basically run a fractional CMO company now with Joel. Disney took their brand seriously. They really took their brand seriously. You don't go on rides, you go on attractions. You don't work in the park, you work on stage. When you go to change in the back, you're going off stage. You are not an employee, you are a cast member. You are not a customer of the park, you are a guest. They created this lexicon, and to me, it is what differentiates them from every other amusement park experience in the world. There might be parks that have better rides or more exciting, but none of them have the brand cachet. Well, John, I would argue it's the same at many tech companies, although certainly didn't work as well. A lot of people took this formula and applied it to what they were doing. And in California on the West Coast, we have In-N-Out. In-N-Out is like no other burger chain in the world. They have their uniforms. They have the specific way employees are dressed and in the specific way that you speak and how they market it. You even see it down to Jack White. If you look at Jack White's performing band, they're always in specific colors. If you look at Third Man Records, everything is done in yellow and black when you go in there. It's treated very seriously, the brand, which I would argue he probably got it more from the Motown finishing school because he's from Detroit versus Disney. But I think that in a lot of ways, in the world of brand and marketing, it can be thought of as so superfluous to care about things this much. But the brands that really, really do care and have lasting power are the ones who take it very seriously. And Linda, I love In-N-Out burgers too. We just got a comment about that. You think about brands that take themselves almost a pinch too seriously. And I want to say this, I'll wrap it up with this. This is a lesson I'm learning myself right now, because as an entrepreneur now, as someone who's not under the helm of a big umbrella, I have to take myself more seriously than I used to. My social media, my Instagram has always been like, this is me, whatever. I've never tried to curate a presence online because my whole job was curating people's brand and marketing. I just wanted my social media just to be me, whatever I feel like, whether it's my food or whatever. But now that I'm working for myself, I have to change that. I have to put my brand out there a bit more and introduce myself and what I do and what I stand for in a different way. So I'm in the process of, taking my own medicine, so to speak. And I think it's the hardest to do it for ourselves. It's the easiest to do it for someone else. All of us can talk about how great someone else is or help market someone else. But when we have to do it for ourselves, it's very difficult if you're not a narcissist.
Wow. This is when you interview Tatiana. I always already get this vibe in the prep call with you. Like there's like so much in everything you say that needs to be written down, shared with everyone, put out there, because it's lived experience and it's very important. It's very relevant and so well reflected everything you're saying. So you're really making me process here and not be good on asking the next question. I was just thinking the next time you see someone on the street who doesn't have tattoos, maybe has one ring and does this, you probably get a good chance, right? That they were in this country called Disneyland for a little too long.
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot here. I'm learning a lot. So you left your corporate life, which is crazy. We had many conversations here about this, uncoupling identity from job. You did that, and then you got really, really sick and your life changed completely. And you also shared that. So can you share it with us and with this group of amazing individuals here in the room with us right now, what happened to you and how it transformed your way of working and interacting with the world?
So both my illness and my leaving the corporate world were happening at the same time, but in slower levels. So I was working at Amazon Music, leading 3 marketing divisions at the beginning of the pandemic, and I started to have weird health stuff going on. But I just attributed to the stress of working at Amazon because there's just zero work-life balance there.
Yay, shout out to Amazon. Great job.
I have no problem saying that. I mean, even at the end of the Great Exhaustion, I'm like, I should leave. I just valued my free time a lot more than dealing with stuff there and making a lot of money. But I was getting really sick. My hair was falling out. I was dealing with, I got diagnosed with some autoimmune thing. I just kind of thought, oh, I'm just really stressed, right? So over the next year, I tried figuring out what's up. And I was doing this kind of Goldilocks thing, looking for the warm bowl of oatmeal, which was the right size job. It was like, this was too big. Let me try something seed stage. This is chaos. Let me try something series B. And I was working as a CMO for a startup that was very well funded. So it wasn't like, as chaotic as other things. And I started to have mysterious panic attacks. And they weren't just mysterious. They were terrifying because they seemed to be linked to when I would eat. There was like something going on where I would eat food and then 30 minutes later, my body would start malfunctioning. And I struggled for 5 months to get a diagnosis, which I didn't know at the time. When you're misdiagnosed, you don't know you're misdiagnosed. You just know that like someone says you have this, you take something. Someone says you have this, you take something. And so that experience, which actually comes 2 years after I wrote The Great Exhaustion, believe it or not, that experience for me forced me to give up a lot of things I could never give up. So I'm a workhorse. I think by nature, a lot of Latinos are. We especially children of immigrants. Both my parents were immigrants. You're just used to working. And I got so sick that it became apparent that I needed to go on disability. And I had tremendous shame around that. I'm the CMO of this company. I should be able to handle it. But I was literally like crying on calls with employees. And that is not something you want to do as a leader necessarily. Not that it's wrong to show vulnerability, but it's just like it has its time and its place. And I just felt this mounting level of pressure and shame, along with the politics of just natural corporate American business life. And so I went into an outpatient anxiety program because I was like, well, everyone's just telling me I have anxiety, so maybe that's it. And the gift of that was I realized I need to stop this corporate track and do what I want to do. I had always been executive coaching on the side. And I'd always been writing blogs. And I mean, I've had that metaphysics blog on Medium for like over a decade. And before that, I had another one for like 5 or 10 years. Like I've always been contributing thought leadership on the subject of mindfulness. I was trained in meditation over 15 years ago. And I was always doing this stuff on the side to be a part of like mentoring people and coaching people. But I was always too afraid to do it on my own, which is also very immigrant kid. You know, it's like you just take the stable thing and you stay. You don't go anywhere. You don't, rock the boat. But I got so sick. And while I was in that outpatient center, I realized I don't think it's going to work for me to go back to a 9-to-5. I just don't think there's a world in which I'm willing to sacrifice. And I don't know when I'm getting better. And then fortunately, I found my doctor. I have this incredible functional medicine doctor, and I got the correct diagnosis and found out food did have a part of it because my body was going into cytokine explosions this constantly based off what I was eating. I started the protocol to start detoxifying my body. And now I'm in a much better place. But it was sort of like the kick I needed to fly out of the nest and start doing the coaching work and the advising work that I'd always been doing on the side full time. And so that's the quasi short version of it.
And thank you for sharing this, Tatiana. It's such a powerful and painful journey that you are on and went on. And Anne just shared a book recommendation in the chat here. When the Body Says No, The Cost of Hidden Stress, which is a book that I think became a bestseller. And I so admire how you got through this, but I also think, like, why does it have to come so far for so many of us, to really get sick until we realize it was too much? Like, when you look back, why did it? I mean, you shared a few reasons. You talked about your background and the fact that you have very, very high work ethics and you work very hard. But why does it take so long for so many of us to get out of this? Why do we have to get exhausted until it is almost a death sentence? Like, it becomes existential for us to step away from the things that make us exhausted.
I think in my experience, it's because of fear. Because the majority of us live our lives running on fear and not faith. And we also, as someone who's been a technologist and who has been an early adopter and has been a part of this world for so long, one of the downsides of it, I think technology is great. I tend to think all new technologies are pretty fascinating and they're only good or bad depending on how you use them. And, we'll all figure it out in time. But one of the definite negatives of the world that we live in today that I learned last year very, very painfully was that information does not make you feel better. And so we each have this idea that if something is wrong with me, I'm going to go to Google and then I'm going to go do this and then I'm going to hire this person and then I'm going to read this thing. I'm going to blah, 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 blah. We secretly think we're all little gods who can fix ourselves. We all think that we can find the answer. And I had this experience last year where I was like, I'm a very educated woman. I have been through a number of things in my life, both traumas and, other sickness stuff and whatever. And no matter what I do, I cannot get an answer right now. I can't get an answer. I never experienced that in my life. And it was so humbling. And it made me think of like Steve Jobs dying of cancer and how he spent all this money in alternative healings or whatever. And he died anyway, right? Ultimately, we're all going to die. And I hate to be like the deep downer existentialist person, but like that is the reality. And we live in a culture that likes to pretend it doesn't exist. And during the process of all of this, one of my dogs died of cancer. And so it was like, I'm sick. I'm trying to get better. And my little Bubba, who was only 8 years old, who was like my shadow, gets suddenly sick. And I'm like taking him to the holistic vet and doing this and that. And what I did everything we could for him. We spent thousands of dollars and he still died in 2 weeks. And unfortunately, that's the reality of life. My dad dropped dead suddenly of a heart attack at 59, day after his birthday, 2 days after my parents' 32nd wedding anniversary. I have a very healthy reverence now for the fact that I am not running the show, and that I need to take every step I take with intention. And I won't always, because it's hard. It's just hard. I have addictive personality. I don't know. I don't even need to say why. I don't need to label it. I can just say, like, it's hard. We live in a world with a lot of trappings. I put a book in the chat that I highly recommend, and it's called Mirrors in the Earth by Asia Soler. And it's a book on reflections of self-healing. And this book was so tremendous to me when I got sick, because I made a pact, and I stopped Googling. I stopped going on Reddit, because No One Healed is on Reddit. I'm just going to say it. If you're sick, No One Healed is on Reddit. It's all the sick people. I stopped trying to cure myself. I stopped trying to tell my doctors how to do their jobs. I found a doctor that I really trust. I trust Dr. Pearl. I do what she says. Boom. And Asia's book is about, thank you, Felix. She had a journey with chronic pain as well as trauma. So she had Lyme disease, she had vulvodynia. I hope they pronounce that correct. She was in a really crazy car accident where she was flipped upside down in a ditch. And she talked about learning how to heal just through the natural earth and the stages of healing. I think what was really painful for me was, and it makes me want to cry just talking about it, I really thought I could get better fast if I had the right resources. I spent tens of thousands of dollars last year trying to get better. And I had this really deep depression for about a week when I realized it wasn't working. And in her book, she has different exercises. They're like lyrical essays with little activities at the end to connect to the earth. I decided to learn the names of all the trees in my neighborhood. I was like, man, we can tell you the name of every car in the neighborhood and, every new house feature, but so many of us don't even know the names of the plants and the flowers and the trees and the bugs that we live around that are our neighbors. And so I learned lace front elm and, jacaranda and the golden rain tree. And there was this lace front elm tree that I decided was my tree in the park by our house. And I would sit under this tree and I would touch this tree and I would talk to the tree and I would just pray and I would sit there. And literally the day that I did that, which was in October of last year, where I was like, I have no answers. I had doctors literally turning me down because they're like, I'm too busy. I just sat down and I was like, I give up, God. I don't know if I'm ever going to get better. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Everything's over. I don't know if I'll ever be able to make money again because I'm losing my mental faculties at this point. And that day, literally right after that deep surrender, I got an email back from my doctor in her office and they were like, we'd love to see you. And she's like, you're right to suspect your anxiety is physiological. And what I've witnessed in the healing process and what I see with my one-on-one coaching clients is we all have our hero's journey and the surrender that we need to make. For some people, it's dramatic, like myself, where it's like the universe knows I'm a tough, I'm a hard lesson learner. I need to be learn it the hard way. And maybe not always, but that's how it's seeming to be. I think I was death grip on my corporate career. And it's I would not have let it go unless it was pried from me. I'm grateful now. I'm awash with gratefulness, gratitude. I also have a healthy reverence for suffering, knowing it's around the corner. I don't live my life blindly. But back to your original question, I don't know why it takes suffering for us to learn things, but I also think that we forget that suffering exists because we live in a culture that just wants to feel good all the time and wants everything safe and wants everything to be easy. And the reality is life is complex. You can feel joy and sadness the same day. And, I did a reel this week about Instagram or social media as a drug. And there's been a lot of media talking about how social media, the algorithms are rigged to increase dopamine hits. But one of the things I don't hear us talking about is more people are not most people are not posting on social media. Most people are consuming social media, and they are consuming it as a drug to check out, especially remote people, right? Because you're got time between calls, you're bored. I'm going to go scroll. And what happens when we stop and we go, ooh, am I feeling a little bit of like shame right now? Because that person on that last call was kind of dismissive to me. Or, oh man, did I just have a grief wave come up about my mom? Oh, it's the anniversary of her death. Oh my gosh, instead what we do is we try to label it. Oh, this is my ADHD. Oh, this is my PMS. Oh, this is because I'm Latina. And it's like, yeah, all those things are true, but also you're a human being having a human experience. And sometimes life doesn't feel good. And so I've been thinking about that a lot. I don't know if this answered your question. I did the Tatiana thing where I'm just like, we're going on a journey. And I just start talking. You gotta rein me in.
No, I'm just going to quote from the chat here. Tatiana, Anne shares, I'm so glad you're better. Rashad says, good on you. It takes courage to share stuff like this. Priscilla shares, I'm not running the show, quote unquote. That hit hard.
Mm-hmm.
And Linda is talking about fear rather than faith. Something, writes Linda, that in my job here drives me crazy is people making decisions based on fear.
Yeah.
Rather than possibility. Jörn is saying, good that you're back on track. And it looks like you're grown massively. And there's much more love coming through here. And I think the way you're sharing it, the way you're reflecting, it touches everyone. It got very personal for me as well, what you said, because I always want to get everything right. I want to get the show right. I want to get all questions right. I want to always be right when I say something. And I guess it's also, in the end, it's fear-based. And it probably is something from deep way back when that's still there. And I sometimes wonder, why is that the case? Why can't I just sit here and get stuff wrong? What? And I'm slowly, like after hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of conversations with amazing people like you, who's smarter than me, more experienced, and have gone through stuff, that are telling me and us here to not base decisions in fear, but in faith, slowly maybe loosening up a little bit around this. But I find it such a hard journey to be on. And the fact that you can sit here with us based on everything that you have done in life, from leading thousands of people in billion-dollar companies to now starting your own firm, it's just remarkable. And I just want to applaud you for being who you are. It's I really have the highest of respect for you sitting here sharing this with us. And I actually I have a follow-up question, but I also wanted to ask you, and again, put you on the spot here. Do you have a question for us? Is there something that you would like to ask us about, something that interests you, or that you like to ask a room of people that you have not met before?
Yeah. I mean, what I would say is my hope and my motivation is always to be of service and to inspire, and to the extent that anyone has a question for me, I would be happy if anyone in the chat or otherwise would want to throw that in there. You could even email me. I'll answer one question free. But going back to faith, one of the things I learned last year, two things based off what you said that came to mind, is I always thought faith was this thing that shows up before you leap. No, faith comes after you leap. And that is the cruel irony of it. You don't get faith before you leap. You just have to feel the fear and do it anyway. The second thing I would say in the subject of personal defects is the why we have certain defects. You can unpack that with a therapist or whatever. In the end, it doesn't matter, right? What happens with our defects, in my experience, is one of two things. One, some of them are removed in time as we go along our life journey and our spiritual journey, etc. The other half may not be removed, but they serve as thorns in our side, so to speak, to keep us humble, to keep us working, to keep us mindful. Like I have heard ever since I was a kid on report cards, she talks too much. Like that was like on a, all women who become leaders got you talk too much on a report card as a child at some point. And that has not stopped, Felix. That has not stopped. I am still someone who likes to talk, and I'm more mindfully aware of it. I don't know if there'll ever be a point where I don't talk too much or I'm not excited to share or gab or whatever. But I use that defect to help and to keep me humble.
I love that. I had the same on my report card. I just saw Linda raising her hand with like, yeah, that was me too. That's why we have a show, so we can finally talk and no one can stop us. And I also was wondering why I'm repairing my camera here. I apologize for the blackout. How do we go forward from here? Like for somebody who's listening, and there were people here sharing their own suffering in the chat, and I highly appreciate that. From long COVID to like things that are not even identified yet. Rashad, I'm so sorry to hear about your frustration and your journey. But how do you recommend, Tatiana, to go forward, like to make the first step on this path? Is there maybe a person that helped you to make that first step, or was it? I mean, you talked about the book, but I feel like the book came further along. So, yeah. What do you recommend for people who are still out there searching for that first step?
So let me start off with a bit of like a cheat code that is true to my life and may not be true to everyone else. I'm also sober. I have really long time sobriety. I'll have 15 years in July 1st. So I was designed for living. I'm a spiritual design for living, and mentors that have really helped me in that space to remember sometimes that like I'm a human being having a spiritual experience, or a spiritual being having a human experience. Second, so that's one thing that's like a little bit different about me that might not be everyone else's thing. When I was really in the throes of sickness last year, and I connected with other people who had the thing I had and got better, and I try not to talk about it too much publicly because I don't want people to glom onto diagnosis. I don't want to be identified with diagnosis. I want everyone just to relate with their own experience of whatever chronic illness they might have. One of the things I learned that was really humbling, because I used to be someone who was like, I'm going to tell you what to do. Got to call this doctor, got to do this thing. What I learned is we all have our path. We will all find our people. And I can certainly share what worked for me specifically, but there's something beautiful in just like letting people find their path. When I work with coaching clients, especially, I always tell them like, I'm just a mirror reflecting to you something you already know about yourself, but maybe didn't know at the top of your head. But the one thing that is universal I can say is there's something about self-compassion that becomes tremendously important. I judge myself so much less now than I used to. I don't have Sunday scaries. I barely have anxiety, which is really weird. And a new experience for me at 45. I secondly, whenever there's like tension, like this doesn't feel good, or I'm mad, or this, I'm much more prone to dive into surrender now. Ooh, why do I resent that person right there? Let me do some self-inquiry on this, because it might just be my perspective that's the issue here, not them. Someone said to me when I was really sick last year, you don't need to make a villain, Tatiana. You don't need to make everyone a villain, And I was like, ooh, what's the world like if I don't have villains? We have a lot of justified anger and justified righteousness nowadays, and resentment just makes us feel bad. Surrender to me is also this thing about leaving room for magic to happen. If you believe in God, it could be the universe, it could be nature, whatever. But there are these forces in the world that are more powerful than us, right? The weather is one. I cannot control the weather. I can be as smart as I want. I can read as many books as I want about it. But at the end of the day, I can't control what's going to go on over here. And that force that runs the world, this is going to get hella existential and metaphysical. That force can work without me doing all the heavy lifting. So set intentions for what you want in your life, take some inspired action, but also don't try to figure everything out into like the nth degree, because then you have choked out the opportunity for magic to happen. How awesome is it when you like run into someone you haven't seen in a million years? You couldn't have planned that, right? It's one of those magical synchronicities that happen where you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you were going to be here. Or you meet someone for the first time and you have the same birthday and you have the same favorite song. And you like these magical moments are these moments where the universe is working and it didn't need your help. You just showed up. Very, really smart people. The tough thing for us is not doing more, it's doing less. So that's what I would say. I would say, like, if you need to get sober, get sober. If you need to join a 12-step program, go do that. Second, have self-compassion for where you're at in your journey. No one improves their life by flagellating themselves and being like, I'm horrible. We all think we're horrible. We all think we're not good enough. Get over it. Like, just, you're doing good enough today. Cool. Second, surrender. Third, leave some room for magic.
Tatiana, I realized that my own connection was spotty, but I will stay on the audio and ask you as a last question to talk about The Artist's Way, A Spiritual Path to Higher Creativity. Julian Cameron's book, I think, led you to the morning pages, and whether you can share how this practice continues to support you as a creative and as a human going forward.
Yeah. So for those who couldn't hear, because it came up choppy for me, Felix is asking about the morning pages, which is a practice listed in the book, The Artist's Way, A Spiritual Path to Higher Creativity by Julia Cameron. If you are someone who does not consider yourself creative, you can still read this book. It is not about people who just think of themselves as creative. It's about anyone who wants to weave in more mindful creativity into their life. So one of her spiritual practices in this book, and the book is very much structured kind of like the 12 steps where you have 12 weeks of working on yourself. Jorn says, Felix, do you switch the not sober function on? So the morning pages are this spiritual practice where basically when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you do after coffee, probably, before you look at your phone, before you do anything else, is you write 3 pages longhand. And I'm being honest, like some days when I'm really tired, it's like, you ain't getting 3 pages, but like I do my stuff and you just write whatever comes to mind. It could be angry. It could be like, hey, I had these crazy dreams last night. It could be, hey, here's my business plan. You can literally write your shopping list for the day, whatever it is. And you write that every day just as a way of dumping what's in your brain and getting straight for the day. And what's going to happen is over time, you're going to start to see things pop up. Like, I really wish I could. I used to paint and I don't do it anymore. I need to leave this job. This relationship isn't working for me. I really wish I could go on a vacation. And you don't share this with anyone else. It's your own private spiritual practice. And that's very, very important. It's like the number one thing in the book is like, you don't share your morning pages with anybody else. I have journals and journals and journals and journals upon journals since I was 7 years old. I actually threw a bunch away recently because I was like, KonMari, just get rid of it. But as a technologist, it's ironic for me to say, like, I really value pen and paper so much. I do all my spiritual work analog. I really like when I'm dealing with something tough, I have to write it out. I'll do these things called Byron Katie turnarounds also, where I just like work through false beliefs and I challenge them. But the morning pages allows us to reconnect with pen and paper and our subconscious thoughts. And I would say if 3 pages is really hard for you because you struggle to focus, start with just one page every morning before you do anything else. whether it's writing your dreams or how you feel that day or the fear you have. It allows us to process before we start our day. And during sleep, we're processing. You know, during your REM sleep, your body is processing. Like dreams are our body's ways of processing the subconscious. That's why our body locks up when we're dreaming. You cannot sleepwalk when you're dreaming. Your body literally freezes during that phase of sleep for a reason, because our body is processing. So it's great to wake up in the morning and dump that on paper before you start your day, before you launch into your emails or your phone or whatever it is. Very healthy for the brain, and very healthy for everybody. I love that Rick Rubin book too. I have that as well. Yeah.
Tatiana Oliveira Simonian, I could talk to you for hours, and it is such an honor that you shared this little time in the universe with us. I hope we can invite you back very soon, because I feel like we all have to learn from you about how to base decisions on faith, about how to feel powerless and still be strong, and how to reflect on things that happen to us and turn them into something amazing, as you did with your company and Breathe. Before we share the final offer from Tatiana today, I just wanted to invite everyone and give Tatiana a little bit of virtual love. Either it's a heart or some virtual glitter towards your camera. This is for you, Tatiana, from all of us. I hope you can feel it.
I love it. That is so cute. Thank you. Obrigada.
Tatiana, you have a final offer to make before we say goodbye today, and an invitation for everyone who joined us on the call. You're currently establishing a program and inviting us to take part. How can we do this? I have the email ready to post.
Yes.
When we reach out to you, what should we do?
There's two things. So on a corporate level, my business partner and I run a mindful fractional CMO firm. If you know any companies that want mindful marketing, call us up, and Breathe Advisors. On a personal level, two offerings. One, I do one-on-one coaching with clients. I call it executive life coaching, because I'm not here just to help you grow your career. I'm help you to grow it in a way that aligns with your life's values. I'm happy to give 25% off to any remote daily people who are watching. I do a sliding scale of 150 to 300 an hour, depending on honor system. You just tell me what you can afford. If that is out of your bracket, I'm starting a new coaching sister circle for women, or those who identify as women specifically. And that is going to be a 1-hour group. It's going to be a mix of mindfulness and group level executive coaching and sharing. It'll be $48. And for anyone who's interested in that, please drop me an email at ts@tatianasimonian.com. I have healed so much through sister circles and through group sharing in the past year. It helps us to feel less alone. It also allows me to scale my coaching in a way that's affordable for people who could not otherwise afford it. So I wanted to offer that up. I haven't even announced it publicly yet, or on my own website. So you guys get the first look at it.
ts@tatianasimonian.com. Reach out to Tatiana if you want to be part of what she is building. And I hope that your circles are taking off in the way they should, because you're really a force of nature for everyone to be healed through. Bye-bye. Take care.
This is remote day.